And let's welcome him in now. We will find out with Pablo Torre.
We're
Thanks
both
for joining
finding
us.
out right now. Good to see you guys.
Let's find it all out, right? Today it's FOS Finds Out. I guess the best place to start, Andy and I are just coming off the heels of our Tuned In Summit. We had Silver there. We both spoke to Silver, me on stage, you right after he came off stage. What did you make of Silver's latest comments on where things stand? Because things are shifting toward how the NBA plays this now.
Yeah, look, this is the defining scandal of Adam Silver's tenure as commissioner. The Clippers have bookended it through that perspective, right? Started with Donald Sterling. In retrospect, a very easy call, obvious documentary evidence. There was a videotape, took 3 days to decide banned for life. This one is a test of what he's actually about. And when I say that, I don't just mean as a person, I mean the concept of a commissioner. He's the judge in a fake justice system with the thing in front of him with these mountains of papers and human sources that I provided who are telling me that, hey, this is in fact a violation of the cardinal rule that you set out. And so when you ask Dan, and I'm watching this live, the Tune-In conference was streaming, and I'm watching you ask him, so you said this, that you didn't know anything about aspiration as a concept. Frankly, I've never heard of the company before. I've never heard of any engagement with the Clippers. There was a clarity there that everybody took to mean the NBA must have been blindsided. And then I post the contract, the $300 million sponsorship deal with the Clippers, and you do the thing that people rarely do, which is ask a follow-up and say, well, what about this other thing? And he almost tries to preempt it. Actually, I misspoke. I had heard about the brand.
It seemed like he came ready to say that you know what, I misspoke.
It seemed like it became perhaps unsustainable to claim ignorance of a deal of this magnitude. Or, by the way, the other implication is you were genuinely in the dark. And the question that you asked, very thankfully for me, because I would have liked to know it too, was, so should you have known something? And so this is a scandal that's not merely about cap circumvention, it's about this larger story about how companies, fraudsters, use sports to launder reputations. Enron, FTX, Aspiration. What should the league be doing on the front end if they're supposed to do it according to the terms of these contracts?
In the days following your investigation, what has your communication been like with the league and Adam Silver himself?
I should say that we have received 0 factual corrections, 0 legal notices saying you gotta walk this back. We are buttoned up. And frankly, we are open to challenges. Part of the sad reality of my life, why I'm seeking yet more audience with Mark Cuban, is because he's the one guy who's trying to do the thing of pushback. And I think it's instructive that when the NBA speaks and when Steve Ballmer speaks, they say things that I find to not be corroborated by evidence, documentary evidence. And so all of the questions that I continue to ask, I wish someone would start answering.
And how about with Steve Ballmer? What has your communication been like with him since?
For every episode, the first audience is the Clippers communications department. They get detailed questions, they get detailed previews. We're gonna say this, 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 and this. They give us statements that, again, in the episodes we sort of lay this out, don't entirely remain consistent as they discover what we have discovered. And so, again, we give them every opportunity to be on the front end of this and say, you got this totally wrong. Instead, you can see what they say, and then you can see what they change when it comes to what they say.
You mentioned Donald Sterling. That scandal was also investigated by Wachtell Lipton, the same law firm. You and I well know that these investigations, these high-profile things, whether it's Louis Freeh, whoever you hire, these things take months, not weeks. And the problem here is that Silver can keep saying, and Ballmer too says, we're cooperating, and they say, we'll see what the investigation unearths. But as the investigation drags on, and it will drag on, the court of public opinion also moves, right? So if you're Adam Silver, do you try to combat that, or do you just completely go silent and say, we'll tell you when the investigation's done?
So I think he's in a tough spot. I will admit that I think this is not just the biggest test because it is the highest stakes test in the ways I've laid out. It's also a tough question for someone whose job, you might think, is really to shrink the scandal to the point of people forgetting. And if there's anything metrically that I have been witnessing from under the hood of this reporting, it's that the number of fans who express real care, concern, frankly, protest about if this is what sports is really going to be like, I want out. The NBA, from a credibility perspective, I mean, look, I don't want to be over dramatic here. I do think, though, it's a real thing when we look in today's world for something resembling fair play. Why is it that people care about the story of Steve Ballmer being held to account for cap circumvention, which is, again, a fake law in America, a real cardinal rule in the NBA? It's because the richest man in sports, one of the 10 richest people in the world, otherwise does not seem to be held to account, except in sports where the thing he wants the most, a championship, a superstar player, he cannot simply buy. And in that way, I'm hearing from fans who want to invest, continue to invest, have invested for their entire life, emotionally, financially, in this game, only to learn that it is rigged, allegedly, in favor of people for whom rules are a suggestion in real life and now in the thing that these people have a deep knowledge about. It's not the tax code, it's their favorite team. And so I just warn anybody who thinks this story is not impactful for just the consumers of this business to just open your eyes to that, because that has been shocking, frankly, to me.
What is the salary cap circumvention's real threat to the NBA? You talk about credibility, and I think a lot of us would assume that's the threat that stands here. So when you talk about salary cap circumvention, how does it threaten the league, this story?
I think there are two ways. Number one is that the salary cap, whether you believe in it or not as a concept, right? MLB doesn't have one. Football does, the NBA does. The whole premise is, how do we create a competitive landscape where you can't just buy everything? And so there's just that idea of the game being preserved in some way of fairness. The other thing, though, from a purely now, let's get under the hood of the NBA, is the NBA's business model. Any sports team's business model is, we spend X, we're valuated at Y. What Steve Ballmer has been doing in terms of the uncapped, on-the-record mechanisms of spending, giant front offices, build a stadium with private money, right? Which is admirable, that's admirable. But if he is overspending in every way, relative to how the other owners spend, and secretly he has put in, according to our reporting, $118 million over 18 months into Aspiration, tracking quite neatly alongside the payments due to Kawhi Leonard in this endless cycle of Aspiration, spending the money as soon as they get it, then going back to Steve Ballmer saying, hey, if Kawhi's gonna be paid, according to my reporting, we need more, right? I can believe that Steve Ballmer was defrauded, but also that there was a scheme to circumvent the cap, which then has impacts on what is the actual real-world valuation of an NBA team. If there are all these expenses that aren't disclosed.
Right.
And that would have an impact on the actual big ticket items that Adam's job, one might assume, is to actually boost.
You talk about the timing of the investments that Ballmer made into this company. There was also the Dennis Wong investment. And it seems to me that probably what's frustrating is, and I know you see this all over Twitter, there's still no smoking gun. You know, a smoking gun would be like an email from Ballmer to someone that says, here's how we're going to get around the salary cap and get Kawhi the full amount he needs. We're going to invest money in this other company that's a team sponsor, and they'll endorse him. Short of that, even if it's ridiculous, can or can't Ballmer and the Clippers continue to just say, yeah, we got hoodwinked. But there's nothing to stop a rich team owner from investing in a startup, right? That is also a partner of the team.
Sure. I would say that Adam actually put it well in one of his comments. He pointed out, a smoking gun is itself circumstantial. It's smoking, but there's no video of the bullet striking the target with the person's finger on the trigger, right?
He said if it's smoking, it just went off. I didn't even really understand what he meant.
I will take it at face value to simply mean that it's very hard to find a videotape, Donald Sterling style, that says, I should be banned from the NBA.
Right.
That's what really the threshold seems to be now. The CBA itself, though, the actual rule says direct or circumstantial. Those are the laws of the NBA land. Direct or circumstantial, and you must be able to explain it, and this is an adverb that is incredibly important to me, rationally. This is codified in the rules. And so when Adam is saying, actually, we need some standard, Dan, that I also share questions about. What is the standard really? Again, fake justice system, it could be anything. But when the rules say rational explanation, right? What is the standard? And in fact, if it's not that, why would it not be that? Why, again, not to just return to the reporting over and over again, but when you get to the question of there was a crazily large deal, sponsorship deal for Kawhi Leonard that was more than 4 times the rest of the celebrity endorsement roster of Aspiration combined. Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert Downey Jr., Cindy Crawford, Orlando Bloom, Drake, on and on. The number one guy was Kawhi Leonard, who got paid while the company was collapsing as Steve Ballmer, almost uniquely with Dennis Wong, continued to pour in money despite disclosures saying it was a terrible investment. While also, this deal for Kawhi Leonard, was never announced by anyone. And he did nothing to the point. So help me understand. I beg anyone to give me an explanation. The question of conspiracy at this point is not, am I reporting a conspiracy theory? The question is, why are you constructing one in the face of the evidence that is being provided?
Without a smoking gun, what is the outcome of this situation, of this investigation? And with one, what is the outcome of this investigation?
That is the wiggle room that Adams' jurisprudence will have. And the question I would ask, big picture, is, are you going to react to this evidence as described, as if you are as I put it before, a victim, the NBA being victimized as someone whose brand has been tarnished, as someone whose rules have been broken, as someone whose owners say, we may commit misdemeanors of cap circumvention, but we don't commit felonies like this. Will you punish with that level of horror, or will you punish in a way that opens up a follow-up question of, why are you behaving like you are trying to cover this up too? And that would be a key question for Adam too.
I think as I look through all this, what's also funny to me is when the teams started doing jersey patches, logo sponsors, whatever those are called, jersey logos,
the jersey patch,
patches, right? There were more companies that you said, oh, that company has enough to do a jersey patch? You know, not just Rakuten, but like across the league. You say, oh, it's not been all huge, well-known brands. And you've reported Aspiration was sort of on its way to being a jersey patch sponsor, right?
July 23, it was due in the contract.
That was in the planning. And you would think that if it had gotten to that point, maybe that's when people would have said, huh? What is Aspiration? But I know we've texted about the fact that there's very much shades of FTX with all this. And so even just separate from cap circumvention, as you said earlier in this interview, it's sort of beyond just that narrow point. It's also like, and I asked Silver this, clearly there needs to be a little bit of a review process for official team sponsors. Like, what is this company? Is this a legitimate company, right? With legitimate money and people running it?
Yeah, they are using the NBA's brand, its buildings, its players, its owners to trumpet their credibility. Sports operates uniquely in America, I would say, where when you see a brand up in the rafters, on a courtside seat, on a jersey, in FTX's case, it was the chest protector of the umpires. The most on-the-nose metaphor, right?
Don't forget, on the arena of the Miami Heat.
Right.
On the arena of the Miami Heat. In Enron's case, it was the Astros Stadium. The reason this keeps happening, sports washing, is because there's the presumed vetting, because of course you guys got all the lawyers in the world, all the PR people in the world. You have armies of people whose job is to protect the brand, the commissioner being at the head of that enterprise. And when you ask Dan, should there be a change in the rules around vetting? And he says, pretty intuitively, maybe there should be. I would say that we are late to that because the real world consequences, to widen it out, are not merely upon, man, those other NBA owners really are getting a short shrift in terms of what they can spend on their players. It's think of the consumers, the everyday people who trust the NBA to co-sign companies because they get into these hallowed spaces. What does that do when those companies then want to raise money, sell them products, sell them all sorts of things? I feel like at some point, the responsibility needs to begin somewhere. And I'm waiting for someone to say, actually, maybe you should start with us.
Yeah, I'm curious about how long this all took and where you go from here in terms of your reporting.
It took 7 months to report, and we continue to report it. So for me, the question of like, where did this come from? This seems like it's out of nowhere. For everybody else, that may be the case. For us, we've been swimming in it. And I just simply want to impress upon people, I have not even seen the bottom of the rabbit hole. When I say that this story has a lot going on, we're talking about truly a company valuated at $2.3 billion once upon a time, due for a SPAC, due to go public via SPAC. We're talking about criminal charges, guilty pleas to wire fraud. We're talking about all these A-list. Bill Clinton is in this story. Drake is in this story. I mean, it goes to so many places. And the gift and the curse is that I think I'm going to eventually see the bottom of this.
Okay, we'll check back in with you when you get further down the rabbit hole.
Anytime.
Thanks, Pablo.
Yeah.